Today's podcast is brought to you by Blue Canary. The bird has landed on beautiful Bainbridge Island, conveniently located at 499 Madison Avenue. ASE Master Technician Clint Ramsey brings over 15 years of experience, award-winning diagnostic skill, and a desire to reinvent the automotive repair experience. Schedule an appointment online at bluecanary.biz or call them today at 206-451-4220.
Hey, it's Michael Fabiano here from SI.com, and I'm excited about the upcoming launch of the SI Fantasy Podcast. Myself, along with Dr. Roto and the Fantasy Executive, will get you ready for your fantasy drafts in 2020 and guide you to fantasy football glory. Get on board with the SI Fantasy Podcast and win your fantasy football league.
This segment of the B.I.Stander Podcast is brought to you by Eagle Harbor Insurance. We don't sell insurance, we help people buy it. This has always been their motto and continues. They understand every family has different insurance needs, be it coverage or premiums. No two cases are the same, and they will always do their best to guide you into the proper coverage to fit your budget. They are here to help anytime. Give them a call at 206-842-7410 or contact them online at eagleharborinsurance.com.
I'm Maria Metzler, the Executive Director of Helpline House. The global pandemic has affected us all differently. If you or your neighbors need food assistance, mental health counseling, rental assistance, or Parks and Rec vouchers, please reach out. Helpline House can help in many ways. Find us on the web at helplinehouse.org. It's what we do. Neighbor helping neighbor.
The B.I.Stander Podcast, in partnership with Bainbridge Strong and the island's own Pegasus Coffee Company, is proud to offer this special release whole bean blend for a limited time. A medium dark roast of coffees from Colombia, Ethiopia, and Sumatra. It offers a balanced, full-bodied cup perfect for virtually any pairing or occasion. $5 from the sale of each 12-ounce bag will go to Bainbridge-based small business or nonprofit of your choice at checkout. I got something for your mind, body, and soul. I got something for your mind, body, and soul.
You have found the B.I.Stander Podcast. Now here's your host with the most, Tiny Tim.
What's cracking, Podcastville? You found the B.I.Stander Podcast. Today, we're talking fire. It's everywhere with our local Deputy Fire Chief, Jared. How are you today?
Good, Tim. How are you doing?
Real well. Good to see you. Looking forward to this rain this weekend and better air quality.
Absolutely. Get the smoke moved out. Get some moisture, not only in the air but more importantly on the ground. So it's definitely a welcome change from the past few weeks for sure.
How long you been with the fire department?
I first joined the department back in February of 2006. Was when I came to Bainbridge.
And where'd you come from?
Before that, I was with the fire department in Greeley, Colorado. They're on the northern Front Range, a little bit north of Denver.
And Colorado people similar to Seattle people?
I tend to get along with most everybody. So I mean, everybody seems to be pretty friendly, and whether it was Colorado or here in the Seattle area.
I just see a lot of transplants between Colorado and Washington. People move from here to there and there to here. So I just kind of assume there's some like-mindedness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm an outdoorsy kind of guy. So, I think one of the only differences is, we've got a lot of water here, with the Sound, but, having the mountains around and lots of opportunities to go outside and recreate. I think there's a lot of similarities there.
Does Colorado get a little bit drier than our state?
Oh yeah, drier, but hotter in the summers and colder in the winters, at least as compared to the Puget Sound area here. So, but yeah, definitely dry in the summers, colder in the winters, warm in the summers. Here is the weather is a lot more moderate, I would say. We don't have those big extremes one way or the other.
So you think the air quality is a little bit better since we're near the ocean and such?
From what I remember, generally speaking, I remember a lot more frequent bad air quality days in the Front Range than I have here in the Seattle area.
Well, let's get into it. We've had a week of kind of post-COVID lockdown in air quality lockdown. And right now we're in a situation where our neighborhood is the worst air globally. We've had a lot of statewide fires that have, I think, don't fact check me here, people, but I think there's over 600,000 acres that have burned this year. Close to 200 homes, huge fires. I think we had 8 or 9 different counties with major fires from anywhere from 70 acres to 300,000 plus acres. It's a topic for discussion, and I can't wait to discuss it with you. What has changed? There seems to be it's a political year too, so there's some fighting about whether it's climate change or forestry practices. Just from statewide observation, how do you think we've got ourselves into this situation that we currently are sitting at home, not breathing the air, not going outside?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's a couple things. One, obviously, climate change is something that's real and it's a big deal. And while climate change itself, I wouldn't say necessarily causes fires, it's certainly going to exacerbate fires that ignite and happen. And we're tending to see fire seasons that are longer than we have in the past. So before, if we expected a fire season on the east half of the state, to kind of pick up in mid to late July and run through, mid to late September, now we're seeing fires start earlier and burn longer, more into October. So we're seeing the season last longer. But I think when you couple that with the forest management practices, as you mentioned, you kind of have those two worlds collide. And when you have that fire, when you take lands that haven't been managed with fire in mind and are not any longer in their normal fire regime cycle, where before the early 20th century, when the U.S. Forest Service was created, and we started this notion of full suppression policy in the forests in the West. That kind of upset the balance of things. And now we get a buildup of fuels, and trees are spaced more densely together. So that climate change, and I think the other part is the human element. So as development moves into more rural areas, and this idea of wanting to live in and around nature and the natural environment, it cooks up this recipe where some bad things can happen, and it manifests itself in pretty significant and severe fires where there's evacuations. People can get hurt, people can get killed, people lose their homes and all their possessions. So I don't think it's anything new. But I do think for us here in the Puget Sound in Western Washington, within the past few years, it is something that is something we're talking about now. So from that standpoint, recognizing that there is a potential to have wildfires on the west side of the Cascades, I think that's a new conversation. And I think it's overdue, and I think it's a good one to have.
Is there a lost message with, I grew up, Smokey the Bear was on all the time. Give a hoot, don't pollute too. There was a lot more PSAs going on that was a constant reminder. Have we kind of lost track of keeping track of burning bans and fire safety and that education wheel of it?
That's a great question. I know that the fire department here on Bainbridge works real hard to get the message out. But I think one of the challenges is there's a lot of competition for getting the message out.
Yeah.
There's with social media, we're in this information age, and there's lots of information flying all the time, a lot of different topics. Covers all the spectrum. So I think that sometimes it's easy for some of those types of messages to get lost in everything else that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Has our preparedness with wildfires decreased? Have we lost funding? Have we not managed the forests as well as we had in the past? Besides it being drier and a lot more fires, in my estimation. Factually, this is not me thinking on fact-based information, more bro science, but it's hotter, and it seems like the world's on fire, and hell's on earth sometimes. Have we dropped the ball in certain aspects of funding and taking care of these forests?
So that's a great question. So I think that certainly from a Bainbridge Island perspective, I would like to think that we're more prepared to respond to fires. I think the fact that we're actually talking about them now, and have been for at least the past couple years, more than we have before, at least since I've been around, I think that's a good thing. I think awareness is half the battle. So in 2010, so a decade ago, the fire department here, we developed a community wildfire protection plan. And in 2010, when we were looking for community involvement with that plan, there was none to be had. We couldn't beg folks to want to participate in taking a look at wildfire on the island and things we can do to help make the island more resilient if a fire was to occur. So fast forward to the past 2 or 3 years with climate change being front and center on a global stage, that has provided a platform for us to talk more about wildfire. So, over the past decade, the fire department has done a lot on the operations side. So the emergency response side, we've got new equipment, we've got better training. All the firefighters on the fire department here are all wildland firefighter trained. So
nice new digs.
We definitely thank you to the community for that. So in some ways, I feel like we're more prepared, certainly as a fire department, than we have been in the past. We certainly have a better educational message and platform that we've been using in terms of community outreach to educate homeowners and property owners about what they can do to help make their homes safer and more resilient from wildfire. I think that the tricky part, the tough nut to crack, is the mitigation side of things. And what I mean by that is things that property owners can do, that architects, contractors, developers can do to build in some resiliency to not only give homeowners a fighting chance for their property to be saved and for them to get out safely if there was a fire. Mm-hmm. It also gives us a fighting chance to be able to defend homes and to be able to get people out of harm's way. But that's ultimately, that also needs to be a transition into a discussion about forest health.
Well, there's a lot of resources on being prepared here on the island and such. But part of me also thinks that it's not reaching, it's not hitting, like you said, with all the other distractions going on. But when it comes to homeowners doing their due diligence, like let's say I want to have 100-foot buffer around my house from any dry fire catching type stuff. I want to know where my fire extinguisher is. I want to know how we leave the house as a family. What our pet routine is going to be. How do we get the puppies out and stuff like that? But is there a sense that we may have gone too green on this island, and in the preservation of keeping it rural, that we're a fire hazard with the amount of green trees and the building styles that we're incorporating through city management?
So I think that I think it's important to have balance. I think balance is really important. And I don't think you ever want the pendulum to swing too far one way or too far the other way. So, one side of the pendulum is we're not doing anything. We're not touching the natural environment. It will exist in the state that it's in until such time that Mother Nature intervenes in some other way where it gets altered. So I think that's one side of the pendulum, and maybe what you were alluding to, of going too green. The other side of the pendulum is this notion that in order to mitigate danger or risk due to fire, that you have to clear cut everything and basically create parking lots and big open fields. That way that that you can't have a fire in the trees or anything like that. And I think that's the other side of the pendulum. I think the right answer lies somewhere in the middle between those two. And I think that the latest science, the latest studies on homes that are lost and homes that are saved and health of the forests, it's not one or the other. It's somewhere in between. And I think that's the balance that we need to find on Bainbridge and get things a little bit more in an equilibrium state than they have been.
Okay, let's go hyper local here. And what are the chances of a massive blaze on our island?
Well, they're actually pretty good if you have the right conditions. And in the past couple weeks, we had all of the key ingredients for that to happen. On the 10th of September, we had a pretty serious wildfire off Fletcher Bay Road. I'm not sure if you heard about that fire.
Yeah, and I want to get back to how that information is put out, because I went looking for that and talked about it. And there was a fire on my road on Lovell too, because of a transmitter that blew.
Right. So we had this weather pattern that was a little bit unusual. It doesn't happen all the time. So we're used to the summers being dry, being on the warm side these days. But a weather pattern formed up, and we ended up with some pretty significant easterly winds. And when we add the easterly wind component in, that can create a really, really potentially dangerous situation. So we had a lot of those factors that lined up. In the south side of the county, South Kitsap Fire Rescue had a couple significant brush fires, wildfires during that time where we had the winds going on. In fact, one of those fires, they had a couple DNR helicopters that were assisting containment of those.
Explain what DNR means.
Washington Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you.
Yep. So our fire on the 10th, the good news about that fire, if there was good news, is that we didn't have the wind that day. So we were able to get that fire contained. It took us a couple hours to contain it. It was almost 20 hours before we had it fully extinguished. It went to greater than 3 alarms, which is a lot of resources that are coming in to help get that thing under control. But had we had wind on that day, I think the story would have been much, much different based on the conditions that we had there.
Okay.
So I guess to go back and answer your question, the potential for a bad day to happen on the island with the right conditions, it's definitely there.
Okay, let me get a little specific about the Fletcher Bay one. Was it on the island center side, where the disposal is? And how far off the main road of Fletcher was it? And do you know what started that fire?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, our best access to that fire was off Fletcher Bay. It was on the east side of Fletcher Bay Road. It was about, I would say, 600-700 feet, 800 feet off the roadway, accessed only by trail.
Yeah, because I drove by the next day. I didn't see any damages.
Yeah, you can't see it from the road, and you couldn't see it from the driveway that we put trucks down to access it. You actually have to get to park in the driveway. It's a long multiple home driveway, and then you actually
very
have
wooded.
to hike in from there. And the hike in from there is another 300 or 400 foot hike off the driveway through the woods to get to it. So. And that's what made it so difficult to locate, was because you really couldn't necessarily see it from the road. That fire was called in by a pilot that was flying over the south end of the island.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Saw a smoke column, had the wherewithal to say, that doesn't look right. That looks like it could be something bad, and called it in to 911. And we still had a hard time pinpointing where it was, and we called for Airlift Northwest, the medical helicopter, and they were able to do a reconnaissance flight for us and help to pinpoint the location. And then we had another 911 call of somebody that actually was able to see the smoke from the fire on the ground on Fletcher Bay. So all of those things kind of lined up and came together. But the cause of that fire was a recreational fire, a small campfire that hadn't been properly extinguished.
Oh, so they thought the fire was out, went to bed. Well, yeah, because everybody goes to bed at 8:30, and that fire was like 11 o'clock at night or something, right?
Yeah. Well, we first got the 911 call from the overhead plane, seeing the smoke column at about 5:45 in the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
But in talking with neighbors, they had strong smells of smoke that morning. They'd been smelling smoke the day before. We believe that fire was actually last tended to a few days before.
Wow.
Before it actually got big enough and broke out where it put up a lot of smoke. It kind of festered and futzed around real low, and with the smoke in the area from the other wildfires here in the West, it made it difficult to locate until it finally broke out.
So this is great information. We get our little warning on our phone that says, stay away from Fletcher Bay. And for the listeners, if you don't have the emergency system, it's on a device called Nixle, correct? Nixle. Is there other ways that people could get warnings?
So that's a great way to get warnings from the city. The fire department also tries to post on Twitter and Facebook as well. But as you know, Twitter and Facebook aren't gonna necessarily give you a text message or any type of override. So we try to coordinate with the city and with the city's emergency manager, have a really good relationship with them on that, and to try to make sure that we're getting information shared with everybody.
Well, give me a little information about this fire on my road on Lovell that happened. What was the very next day?
That is a good question.
You got to stop with the good questions. I'm a pro.
So tell me a little bit about what you know. And then
I heard that
maybe
Lovell and Wallace at around, I believe 9 p.m. a transformer sparked some vegetation fire.
We did have a couple of other small brush fires, and one of them was on Wyatt. And I know the crews were able to get out there and get a quick knockdown of that.
It doesn't pretty low key.
It didn't sound like there was any danger. They were able to handle it with a single unit. So, which could be one of the reasons why it's not burning super bright on my radar.
Let me get back to Fletcher. Is there any rumor that there was issues with the hydrant on Station 22 or something like that, where you were denied access to water somehow?
Yeah. So, there wasn't good hydrants in the area on Fletcher Bay where the fire was. So something that you may not know is that, I would say probably about 50% of the island doesn't have fire hydrants. So the fire department has water tanker trucks. We call them tenders. They carry 3,000 gallons of water. And when we know we're going to need to bring water to the fire, we will roll the tenders. So in this particular case, we had a good tender response to supply us water once we were able to get hose lines back to the fire. One of the tenders went to Station 22. We've got a hydrant in the back, and went and tried to fill off that hydrant, and it wasn't functioning properly. And they relocated the hydrant in front of the station. It worked fine. So we were able to find out what the problem was and get that corrected so that hydrant's back in service. So
yeah, that could be a scary moment, right?
It happens from time to time. You never like to see it happen, but it's one of those things that we troubleshoot, and all of our apparatus operators are trained to a high level. So we were able to overcome that really quickly, and it didn't have any adverse impact to the operations or the outcome of the incident. But it's not something that we like to see.
Right. I don't mean to be hypercritical either, but isn't there a review process? I know fire department shows up at the schools, checks the fire extinguishers, businesses, stuff like that. It would just make sense to me that you would check if the water's on at the fire station.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the fire stations aren't any different than any other building that we inspect when they get built. So all of those systems were checked and were operating properly at the time. The fire department inspects all the fire hydrants on the island once a year. So we get around, we turn them on, make sure that we can get water to them. If there's any deficiencies in those hydrants, we pass those deficiencies along to the water purveyors. And in this particular case, that hydrant out back is not a hydrant that we used on a regular basis at the station, and it hadn't had its annual inspection yet this year. So
with the remodel, you have the new hydrant in the front as opposed to the back, right? Or are they both working?
Yep. So both those hydrants went in when that station was rebuilt, and during the inspection process to be able to get occupancy for that building, part of the things that we do is we check all of those systems, whether it's alarm systems, sprinkler systems, new fire hydrants, all those things get checked.
How old is that new building? Is it 1 or 2 years old?
We moved in, it's less than 2 years old. Yeah, we moved in 2019.
All right. Now it's time for me to get critical, and I hope you can be a little bit critical of our land trust, our city of Bainbridge Island, and our parks department a bit, because we're all in, the typical land owner like myself and yourself. We're all in this together more now than ever. And I look at a lot of the critical area ordinance based around trees and vegetation and easements and such. And there's huge fines for chopping down trees and such. But I also look at the Parks Department, who manages land trust areas, the city of Bainbridge Island, who has multiple public parcels. And two of what I think is the biggest fire hazard pieces of property on the island are the Suzuki property that's been battled forever because it's a spindly, dry forest. There's not much light, so you don't get the big girth in the trees. You get toothpick forest. And then I look over there at across from the Parks Department at Strawberry Hill Park, and there's just a lot of dead wood. And I know the Parks Department does a tremendous job of having nursing trees and grinding up stuff for pathways and maintaining great trails and signage for evacuation and such. Why do you think that there's such a demand on the private landowner not to mess with vegetation and trees, but yet the city doesn't seem to clean up their own backyard? And in my humble opinion, and a fire guy, I see fire hazards in big parcels of land that the city owns that they fight over and do nothing with. How hard would it be just to say, hey, we got some free firewood, you just got to clear some of these dead trees out of here. Take what you want, all hands on deck. Let's clean up this forest.
So I think you bring up a really good point here, and something that I touched on earlier. That's trying to find the equilibrium here,
the balance,
in trying to find that balance. And I think that really where we're at now, and I mentioned mitigation, the mitigation side of things, and that could be land management, can be, more fire hydrants on the island, better access to certain areas, certain parcels on the island. When I talk about mitigation, I'm talking about those things. But I think that what really has to happen, kind of what the next step is, and what I'm cautiously optimistic that we can have happen, is that we can take best practice for wildfire risk and best practices to mitigate that risk. And we can take those best practices and deconflict with current city ordinances, because the two oftentimes they cross paths, and they tend to be this mutually exclusive thing. And what I mean by that is there's best practice out there for how to manage one's property to make it more resilient to fire. And not all the things in best practice that are recommended to be done can be done under current city ordinance. So until we get to a point where we can deconflict those two things, unfortunately, property owners at the end of the day get caught in the middle of that, of wanting to do the right thing to be able to protect their property, but also wanting to make sure that they don't get caught breaking the rules that are currently in place and getting penalized for those. So, some things that have happened recently that are encouraging to me. Number one, I think more people have taken notice. I mean, we're doing this podcast now. At our last Board of Commissioner meeting, Board of Fire Commissioners, we had some great public comment to this. I think over the past 2 to 3 years, we've had more interest and more engagement from the community wanting to learn more about what the risk is on the island and what they can do to help protect their property. And I think that is a great step forward for us to be able to have this discussion and for all parties to be able to listen to what's going on. And I've also been encouraged that, there's been some organizations that have stepped up and have tried to get involved in addressing this. And most of it comes in the form of discussions about how climate change is impacting their organizations and properties that they manage. We've had great discussions with the Land Trust about wildfire and steps that the Land Trust can take to help make some of those trust lands and lands that they manage more resilient.
What do some of those conversations look like with the Land Trust?
Well, a lot of the conversations look like where the human-built environment interact with the natural environment. And a lot of this is about transitions. And I think that's where it needs to start. High-risk areas, and those high-risk areas for fires to start are going to be where development is. And what I mean by that is around homes, along roadways, and if you don't properly manage the transition into a more heavily vegetated area, we're going to have problems being able to suppress that fire. And there's going to be a higher likelihood that fire could potentially get out of hand. So working with the Land Trust to look at the lands that they managed and how they interact with nearby homes and structures, that's been a really good first step with them on that. Just within the past couple weeks, the city and the Parks District have both contacted the fire department, and they have asked for some help in talking about management of some of their properties as it relates to wildfire risk and being able to engage and partner with neighboring properties as well. So that's been really encouraging. Now, obviously, what we would like to see is for some actionable items to come out of that dialogue.
I want to see Suzuki and Strawberry Park cleaned up. I really do. I mean, I'm not worried about the 400 plus acres on the Grand Forest because it's lush vegetation. Strawberry Hill and Suzuki, especially because it's so close to the Commodore homes, it's where kids travel. It's by the schools. I could see accident happening there quite easily. Am I wrong to think that?
There is certainly potential. We've had one brush fire that I can remember off the top of my head within the past few years that happened on the Suzuki property. we were able to quickly contain it. So that was good. But yeah, there are a lot of areas throughout the island that we consider priority mitigation areas that we need to focus on, and you're going to see those areas identified by proximity to transportation corridors and density of homes in those immediate areas, because resources are limited. So you want to try to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people that you can as we start to tackle some of these issues. So if you get on the fire department's website, there's a lot of wildfire resources. There's access to the Community Wildfire Protection Plan from 2010. And there's a map in there that shows priority mitigation areas of areas that the fire department feels that we need to focus on first. And there's no shortage of areas that are on that map.
And that's at BIFD.org?
Yes, sir.
Right on. Yeah, I don't know what the lack of action by the city of Bainbridge Island has been about maintaining those parks that are public area. It just seems like there's another consultant talking about another idea every year, and in the meantime, it just doesn't get cleaned up. And the efficiency that the Parks Department maintains trails and picks up debris from trails is amazing. I think they do great work, and it'd just be nice to see that area cleaned up right away.
Sure.
What are the evacuation plans? We live on an island. There's, jump in the water or go over the bridge. What is the main plan of, basically a 1-lane road out of Dodge?
Yeah. So the fire department and the city partnered together and put together a wildfire evacuation planning guide. That guide can be found both on the fire department's website and also on the city's website. So I think one of the things that everybody needs to understand is we live on an island, and living on an island, there's an assumption of risk that goes along with that. There's there's no hospital here. There's only one road off of the island. There's, ferry to get to Seattle. So, in some ways, that's a choice. And for those of us that choose to live in a beautiful place, we want to make sure people are aware of some of the risks that go along with that. So as it pertains to evacuation, anybody that thinks there's a silver bullet to a mass evacuation of Bainbridge Island is kidding themselves. Evacuation planning when we only have one road off is really, really difficult. And the idea that we're going to be able to evacuate mass amounts of people over the Agate Pass Bridge is just not realistic. That's why these other mitigation efforts are so important for us to be able to do. That being said, we do have a plan to Ann Lesage, who's the city's emergency management coordinator, and ours knowledge, we have the only wildfire evacuation plan that's been documented in Kitsap County for sure. But it's an attempt for folks to be aware of some of the idiosyncrasies that go along with evacuation, because with all the emergency planning efforts that we've been doing, a lot of that's focused on earthquakes and having enough supplies to hunker down. So we realized as we started trying to formalize an evacuation plan that message was going to be completely the opposite of what we've been telling people for emergency preparedness, which was, 2 weeks ready and be ready to hunker down and map your neighborhood groups and those kind of things. So, we've created this notion of evacuation zones on the island. We've prioritized certain roadways on the island. Public Works has been involved in the planning. but know that the island's road network does not have the capacity in a mass evacuation. So we've got lots of contingency plans in place that we've talked about.
Like go buy a kayak?
Well, so we have had discussions with the Washington State Ferries about being able to recall ferries and bring them in to Eagle Harbor.
That's
for us to be able to
know.
load folks that way. So the state ferries have been on the loop on that. We've also identified certain areas of the island, and again, so much of this is situational, depending on what exactly is going on, what the situation is, how fast it's moving. We've also identified areas that we may relocate people on the island where it's safer, just to get folks out of the way. And then there's been another plan that Ann and I have talked about, and we're in the process of trying to get the concept down on paper. But I've coined it the Dunkirk plan, and that is getting people to the water and evacuating people via water. And I'm not talking about necessarily formal docks or whatnot. I'm talking about anywhere they can get to the water, whether it's road ends or whatever the case may be. And we've talked about the coordination involved. Part of that would involve the city flotilla that the city's been working on. But the other part of it is simply coordinating with citizen boats and the U.S. Coast Guard to coordinate citizens in private vessels to be able to come and pick people up. And that's a worst case last resort scenario. But if we're not being creative and thinking about those worst case scenarios and what we may have to do when those desperate times come, then we're not doing a good service to the citizens.
Yeah, I also think we need to prepare for our domestic and wildlife as well. Your lovely wife Heather is involved with pets, so am I, and we tend to take care of a lot of dogs and people's pet needs here on the island. And that's something that's kind of lost at times. Like, what are you going to do with your dog, your chickens, your horse, your goat? There's a massive amount of wildlife here. There's a lot of other things to consider just besides your immediate self.
Absolutely. It's, as you can see, these types of situations can get really, really complex really quickly. So one of the most important things you can do is for yourself and for your immediate household is have a plan to take care of you. And then the next thing is, the neighbor on each side of you. Do you even know your neighbor? Do you converse with them?
Talk a little bit more about this mapping your neighborhood preparedness.
Yeah, absolutely. So Map Your Neighborhood really is the cornerstone of emergency preparedness on the island. And it's the idea of this notion of a whole community approach to dealing with emergencies. No fire department is ever going to be big enough to deal with that magnitude 9.0 earthquake that impacts the island in its entirety. You'll never have enough firefighters to do it. Number one, we'd never be able to afford to do it as taxpayers. But what we see in those types of disasters time and time again is neighbors helping neighbors, citizens helping citizens. So Map Your Neighborhood is our attempt to be able to do that. And basically it's getting individual neighborhoods together. Number one, meeting your neighbors, but number two, making sure that everybody has a plan, is holding each other accountable, and has the wherewithal to actually help each other out when we have a disaster. Because there's going to be certain scenarios where there's not going to be enough firefighters to go around. There's not going to be enough police officers to go around. There's not going to be enough, official government response agencies to go around. It's going to be neighbors helping neighbors. And Map Your Neighborhood is the platform that we're using on Bainbridge to be able to raise that awareness and really get organized. And then the next step beyond that is working with the city and the nonprofit Bainbridge Prepares, where then we up that game a little bit and have, organized citizen responders to be able to respond to certain situations, whether that's community emergency response team, the CERT team, whether that's the Bainbridge Island Emergency Medical Responders, the Medical Reserve Corps. There's lots and lots of different teams that Bainbridge Prepares has, where we're taking members of the community, we're getting them together, on a common mission on a common topic to do that. And I guess circling back around to your question about pets and livestock and those types of things, there is an animal care team that's part of Bainbridge Prepares that is looking at and putting plans together to address that very thing of, all right, how are we going to deal with livestock evacuation? And we'll be able to activate that team, and they'll be a central part of our response, because the bottom line is, both as a resident and as a member of the fire department, everybody's going to be in this together. And when we have that bad day, it's going to take everybody working together to make a difference.
So you mentioned quite a few programs there, and talking about relying on our own village here. What's the one thing that I didn't hear you say is volunteer firefighters. Mm-hmm. And what does that look like here on the island? Are there people ready to go in the wings that you can call upon that are residents, that are trained and have an understanding?
Yeah, we have the volunteer firefighter program still exists on the island. We have a number of volunteers. In fact, we've got a volunteer fire academy going on right now with some of our new volunteer firefighters and EMTs. There's about a dozen of them they're training up at the Phelps Road Fire Station, going through their basic firefighter academy training.
About how long does that take?
So that latest academy started last weekend, and that'll run through the second weekend of December. So it's set up where they have class Friday evenings, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and it'll take from now until the middle of December to be able to get all of that basic firefighter training. That's on top of having to go through their EMT training as well, which is another 3 months worth of some nights and weekends. So it's
what kind of person is attracted to that type of job? 6 months of training and then volunteering for no pay. You got to be what I would think a pretty special person.
Yeah, definitely. The folks that we see going through the volunteer program these days are one, folks that are really, really compassionate people that want to be able to help. Two, they kind of like some of the stress and excitement that goes in with the response. And then the other part of it, and we've seen a real big change in demographic over the past 15 years or so. I think if you look back 20 years, 30 years, when you look at the composition of the volunteers in the fire department here and in a lot of places around the country, that composition was citizens that want to be able to give back to their community and protect their community.
Wow.
That's changed. A lot of the volunteers that we see now are folks that are looking to make a career out of it, and they want to get experience. So we've had to change here on Bainbridge the way we've gone about trying to recruit folks and get them on board, because frankly, our demographic on Bainbridge isn't what it used to be. We have a lot of folks that have jobs that don't allow them to just up and leave, or they have jobs on the other side of the water. So the ongoing training requirements are difficult. So it definitely takes the right kind of person to want to do it. And
that sounds like a needle in the haystack trying to find that person. Is it? Are you guys running into difficulties?
We've had a steady stream of volunteers that come in, but we don't see the volunteers anymore that are staying on for 10 years or 20 years because they live here and it's what they want to do. If we get 2 or 3 years out of a volunteer firefighter, we're calling that good. So it's a bit of a revolving door, but that's okay. We still have folks that want to serve the community on Bainbridge, whether they live here or not, and it certainly keeps all the rest of the staff on the fire department really on their A game, because some of the best ways to get proficient and to stay sharp at the craft of firefighting and emergency medicine is to train others.
Teach others, yeah.
So, the program has gone through an evolution on the department, and I think change is good. And we continue to move forward, looking develop that program and maintain a robust volunteer firefighting force. I will say that when it comes to a disaster scenario, that's where the Bainbridge Prepares group comes in. Because there's, that really ginormous incident, the big earthquake, for example. We rely on that Bainbridge Prepares group to give us that trained volunteer pool for those kind of responses. And they have a really robust pool. We're really, really pleased with that. The ongoing training requirements and commitment aren't nearly as rigorous as being a volunteer firefighter, and those folks are still built into our response model. So it really kind of complements the response, especially for those larger disaster scenarios where the person that they can't quite commit to the level of maintaining the training and commitment for a volunteer firefighter EMT. They still want to be involved and be part of that response. There's some great teams out there that we plan to utilize for big disasters, and we've already utilized in some of our local responses already.
All right, a couple more questions before I let you go back fighting fires. One would be, what's your relationship with aviation as a fire department? You were talking earlier about that you got information from a random pilot, and then you had the flyover to confirm what's going on. How much of and you guys medevac lots of people from the island to Harborview. Tell me how aviation kind of plays a role in your fire department.
Well, I think you hit on a couple of the main points there. Is we deal a lot with medical evacuations via helicopter, whether that's airlift or life flight. We have the helipad at Station 21, as well as a number of other designated landing zones spread out around the island. And on average, the past few years, we've had airlift come out to do air transport of patients probably around 50 times a year. So that's not an insignificant number. So both Airlift and Life Flight are really good partners in that endeavor. But we also have access to other resources as well. I mentioned earlier that the Department of Natural Resources has helicopters that are available to us during fire season. So
and they have the ability to dump chemicals or water on the fire as well?
Yep, they'll bring buckets in and are able to do that. We also have the ability, heaven forbid, if we needed to, we could call in air tankers, which are the ones that drop the retardant and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. We also have access to bring those resources to bear, and there's other aviation assets that we can also call and have access to. Joint Base Lewis McChord and through NAS Whidbey, through the Navy's search and rescue. The Coast Guard have been really good partners for us as well, both with fixed wing and rotors. We've used them in water rescue incidents and searches in the Puget Sound. So I think one of the up and coming things that is something that we're keeping our eye on is the idea of drones and being able to do some of that on a more, as you call it, hyper-local type basis. South Kitsap Fire Rescue on the south end of the county, they've recently implemented a drone program, and we're keeping a close eye on that.
Sorry to cut you off, but what does the drone do other than give you a visual? It's not carrying up buckets of water, right?
No. What it can do is give us a visual. It can also be equipped with infrared, forward-looking infrared. So,
okay.
So if you're talking about searches for missing people in the woods, which is something that we assist law enforcement with from time to time, it's something we can utilize in that method as well. Not from a fire suppression. It's not really a fire suppression platform.
Informative.
But in terms of situational awareness and searches is what the primary use of that would be.
And getting our Amazon package.
Yeah, right.
You just sparked another thing with me though. Defunding the police, how does that affect the fire department? I know Seattle's defunding it to some extent, and that's for lack of a better word, moving programs around and resources and such. Does that put an added strain to fire departments, especially the Seattle Fire Department?
I can't speak to the big city over there.
Nobody's listening. Come on, Jared.
But I can speak to the relationship we have with Bainbridge Island Police Department and local law enforcement here that we work with on a regular basis. And the bottom line is, when it comes to the safety of the public and responses, we rely on each other in a lot of different situations when it comes to response of folks that are in need. So we train a lot with law enforcement for active shooter situations, and we rely on law enforcement to protect us when we have to respond into situations that involve acts of violence. And that they provide protection for us to be able to go in and do what we need to do to be able to save lives. We have a partner agreement with the Bainbridge Island Police Department where we will put firefighters on the police boat for water rescue responses. They have a much better boat platform than we do for that type of work. A much more stable platform, a platform that we can go out and inclement weather. So there's definitely some impacts that we could see occur for reduction in certain programs.
So we have two of the main political players here on the island, the Governor Jay Inslee, who trumpeted climate control when running for president and continues to do so. And then we have the Department of of wildlife, Hillary Franz, who is pretty avid fire supporter. Do you think they are giving you enough of what you need as political leaders in our environment?
So, as it pertains to wildfire response, we've been really, really happy with the help and partnership we've had with the Washington Department of Natural Resources. We've seen over the past few years a lot more focus on wildfire resources made available to us, whether that's aviation assets, whether that is partnerships for resources for programs like Firewise and whatnot. So we've been pretty happy with some of the improvements that have been made over the past few years with respect to the support that we've seen from the state. Ultimately, anything like that, it requires funding to get those things done. So whether or not the state legislature has and is able to allocate funds in those particular areas, that's really up to the politicians to figure out. But from my perspective, we've certainly seen an improvement. I've been happy with some of the support for statewide wildfire coordination and resources.
All right, Jared. Hey, I really appreciate you hopping on and talking fires, especially when it's, pardon the pun, a hot topic right now.
So anytime, Tim.
Virtual Day for Preparedness is coming up Saturday the 25th online, 10 to 3 o'clock. You can get links at BIFD.org and participate in learning more about fire training and what you need to do as a family to secure yourself.
Yep.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, correction on that date, Saturday the 26th.
26th.
Yes, sir. It should be great. They're going to have panelists that are going to talk about earthquake risk and history on Bainbridge Island, and there's going to be a lot of showcase of Bainbridge prepares and ways that everybody can get involved to help with making the island more resilient in the event of an emergency, a pandemic, an earthquake, a wildfire, any kind of disaster, because it's going to take all of us. So really encourage folks to register for that and attend and be inquisitive and learn a little bit more about what we're doing to try to keep the island safe.
Awesome. Thanks for putting that out. It's really a great resource. Send my best to your wife, Heather, and your son, Tyler.
Will do. Thanks,
I don't talk to you enough. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Even though it's virtually. Chief Deputy Fire Marshal, Jared. Is that correct? Is that your title?
Deputy Fire Chief. I also serve as the Fire Marshal as well.
Fire Marshal Bill. All right, Jared, thanks for your time. You've been listening to The Bystander. You guys be kind and be safe out there.
Hey there. Band of Steves here. If you've enjoyed the music on this podcast and you'd like to learn music, get in touch with me. Electric bass, guitar, theory, voice, production, writing. stevenewtonmusic@gmail.com.
Hey, it's Michael Fabiano now with Sports Illustrated, and I'm here to help you through this wild fantasy football season. To win in fantasy, you need player rankings you can trust, and ours have received the Top 5 Accuracy Award over the last 3 seasons. Sign up for the all-new SI Fantasy Plus at si.com/fantasy. We even have tools that sync with your leagues and experts who are standing by answering your questions in our premium chat. Sign up for SI Fantasy Plus at si.com/fantasy and win your leagues in 2020. That's si.com/fantasy.